Hello there, yarn lovers. It's Gary, and I'm coming to you from my happy place, the Yarn Corner here on the west coast of Canada. So welcome, welcome, welcome on this fine Tuesday, May the 7th, 2024. How are you all doing? I hope you're doing well and staying safe. If you're happening across this channel for the very first time, I want to welcome you. I set this channel up to talk about all of my yarny adventures in knit and crochet. I do talk about my acquisitions as well, where I buy my yarn and tools of my craft from. So if that is of interest, please stick around. And for those returning, I want to say welcome back. Good to see everyone. And thank you for all the comments. This video that I'm putting together is going to be a bit of a Q&A. I posed a question whether or not viewers would like to do a bit of a Q&A here on the channel. In the community tab. So I got a good response. I got around 40 questions. I put them all down, collected them, and have them in a list in front of me. So I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. If I happen to glance over or maybe not get through this whole question in the time frame, I'm going to maybe stop at around 20 minutes, because who wants to listen for 20 minutes on rambling stories or going off on tangents? So yeah, I will savor those unanswered questions for another date down the way and do another Q&A. So yeah, I know I talk about what Hank, my man form, is wearing, and he is sporting a crocheted sampler stitch scarf that I did 3 years ago or thereabouts. And I was looking at a stitch dictionary. Not all of them are from the Stitch Dictionary, but I wanted to try a few new to me stitches, and I wanted to see how they would work up with a number of stitches going across the scarf. Now, I did make a couple of bad choices, I guess, with the stitches, because the counts were off maybe 1 or 2 stitches. So it does have an interesting fault line for edges. So they're not straight edges, they're all kind of wriggly, and some are like more compressed and then they flare out. So, but a great learn for me. And I do like looking back at it just to see what kind of stitches and color work that I had done in these patterns here. And it's something to reflect back on as a sampler for me if I'm looking to fill in a design gap or get some inspiration from. So, and also to learn a new stitch. I also used a lot of scraps in this project. To talk about the book where I got the stitches from, or the majority of them, it's this one here. It's 1,000 Japanese Knitting and Crochet Stitches, and it's by Tuttle. I'll link all the publications, any YouTubers that I mention, or tutorials down below in the description box. So please do go down there to take a look if you are interested to find out more information. Okay, shall we get started? Let's see how much I can get through. The first question, a lot of people ask this, so I won't actually flag the person who poses the question, because it was a general consensus that these were similarly worded throughout the poll that I took, like the questions. Biggest one was, when did I start crocheting and knitting? The first thing that I did was I started knitting, and that was, I still remember the month, it was March 2019. And I've never looked back since. I've always kept knitting. I've never had any breaks since then. So what's that? That's around 5 years, 5.5 years since then. And then a little later, not too much later, I started crocheting. So I'm going to say August, September, around that time frame of 2019, I started crocheting. And also never looked back. I do like both of them. I know that there was a question somewhere here, what do I prefer, what my first love was. And I think I'm going to say both of them. They give me joy in different ways. And same crossover, like there's some crossovers of enjoyment for both, but they do give me satisfaction in different ways. Maybe I'll get into that further down when I'm talking about some of the other questions. I got a question here that says, how did I learn to crochet and knit? Well, YouTube, of course. I was a huge sponge. I watched a lot of YouTube hours, many different instructors to get an idea of what worked for me, the way I hold things, the technique that I was going to use. So there are many that prominently feature here in my notes, but also there are many more that I can't quite remember. There were certain gems that I picked up along the way that helped me through, but I'm going to name a few for knitting and crochet. So the knitting side of things was definitely Stacy over at A Very Pink Knits. There was Ryan over at RJ Knits, and there was Craig from Fiber Spider, just to name a few. There was also the Nervous Knitter. I liked watching her tutorials, and later down the way too, I was picking up lots of little techniques, going back to visit those instructors. For crochet, there was definitely Crystal over at Bag a Day. I still go back to her for inspiration, for education and technique, and getting fun stories about the yarn that she purchases, all that sort of great stuff. And there was Anastasia, as well as Coco from Bella Coco, sorry, that helped me to get a handle on my crochet, and still do till nowadays. Yeah, what was my first project? My first project for knitting was a 1x1 knitted scarf. It no longer is in existence because I ripped it back after around 6 months. I wanted to use the yarn for something else, and the yarn that I had used was Loops and Threads Charisma. It's a 5 bulky, and I put it back into a project. So I re-knit it, and it is in the same stitch but in sections in this blanket. So I'm doing a 1x1 ribbing, and this is the Charisma here, and I'm pairing it with, I don't know what color, what yarn this was, but I crocheted swatches as well as re-knitted the scarf, and I made a lapgan out of it. So the first original finished work is no longer with me, but it is reincorporated in this lapgan. The first crochet was a beanie called the Chocolate Bonbon Beanie by Crystal. Funny story about that was I was on YouTube and I searched tutorial textured beanie, and the first 5 or 6 that came up that I could choose from were Crystal over a Bag of Days tutorial. And I popped that on. I knew what the difference was between knitting and crochet by the time I was embarking on this crochet journey. I really wanted to do this tutorial so badly because I love the texturedness of that beanie. So I went back to Michael's, got myself some crochet hooks, and I had yarn at that time, so I just came back and I played that thing over and over and over again until I learnt the stitches. I mean, that's kind of a meaty thing to start off with as your first crocheted item. It has front post double crochets. I think it has the camel stitch, which is one of my favorite stitches. Later down the way, that's a question. And what else does it have? Single crochet, double crochet? I think it has those as well. But I got there in the end. I'm going to say it took me 2 weeks, but only because of the confidence of Crystal as a teacher. She inspired me to keep going, saying that it was possible. And like with my knitting, I wasn't going to give up. I was wanting to keep going until I got the confidence to read my stitches. And that's probably the hardest thing to do as a developing crafter in the art of knitting and crocheting. So reading your stitches is something that when it comes to you, it just makes the work that much enjoyable. Or projects, when you put them down and come back, you can reread where you were. It's like a language, really. You sort of like are getting the story being told from the row below, and then you read the pattern and figure out where you are. So you're never lost. Okay, so what was my favorite project? That's interesting. I think all of them have some sort of favorite element to them. So I think in general, if I'm answering that in a more general sense, how do I value a project, whether it's rates like one of the favorites, would be that it gives me interest, keeps my interest. So if it switches up over the course of time and I am not getting bored with the stitches, that's a pattern that I'll really gravitate to. Also, if there is something that's going to be revealed after like a couple of rows of work, so you don't get the fillet flower, say for example, or a cable that's intertwining in around each other until like row 16. Then on that row 16, when I'm looking at it and I'm holding the work back, I'm like, wow, what a reward. That is a great pattern in my regard. The designer has thought about how to keep my interest, and I love that. It's like reading a great climax in a end of a chapter of a story or a book. So I really like those projects that keep my interest. What inspires me to keep creating? That's a good one. I'm going to say the learning factor. I think I covered that just in the past question, but also looking to see what everyone else is doing. So people inspire me, other crafters, and I still get that too today. Is I am watching on the YouTube streets, you know, friends that I've met here at the yarning community that are showing me their works and their gold mines that they've made, their milestones, and it keeps me going. I think, you know what, I want to do what they did too. I want to feel confidence in the things that they do in my own journey too. So you guys who are watching really do spur me on. So thank you. Thank you for always being that source of inspiration. Okay, when did I start my YouTube channel? I started in October of 2019. So I started my crafting really only 6 months to 3 months before the YouTube channel dropped. And I really was focusing on the YouTube channel being a visual diary or a visual journey for myself to reflect back on and look over this study of where I found my pitfalls, where I found my inspiration, where I, you know, had my highs and when I had my lows kind of thing. So I think that's what spurred me on, but also the reason for a YouTube channel for me is to connect with like-minded people. I was interested in finding out as much as I could in a short amount of time as I could, and we were going through the lockdown at that time too, so that it was a win situation for me to learn and fast track on a passion that I just was brand new at. I was really deer in headlights when it comes to YouTube. I still get jitters and I still am not natural in front of the camera. And I also didn't know the language so well in the terminology of the craft. So for me, I didn't understand what skein was, whether wool meant all types of yarn, you know, cotton. And I kind of grew up in the time when wool was everything. So I had to learn to, you know, differentiate the styles of fibers out there. And I wasn't privy to that. So I had issues with like knowing exactly what I was talking about. So I feel very awkward running a YouTube channel when I feel like I'm just an infant myself with learning the words. How often do I craft? Every day. I would say I try to put in 2 hours during the weekdays, and sometimes on the weekend I want to double that. So I want to do around 4 hours each day. But things like life and having a dog and being married and, you know, looking after family and all that sort of thing gets to be the predominant feature in what I should do, what I need to do, and what I like doing. And also the videoing, editing and uploading takes me away from doing my crafting as well. So I try and get as much in as I can. Okay, what's my day job? Okay, this is an interesting one. I currently am a graphic designer. I have been for the last 12, 13 years. And I work a lot with visually organizing data. Like, I guess if you're talking about information, I kind of make it look pleasurable and digestible and make it so that it is speaking to an audience in a way that is user-friendly, inclusive, and has an equitable standing. And yeah, so I do a lot with color. I work a lot with color in this channel as well as in my day job. And I have need to do representation in graphics as well, like as the standard stuff like graphs and icons and illustration, all that sort of thing, to help with the experience of digesting the material. Okay, I did have a question here as well for how I hold my hook. If I'm getting down to the nitty gritty of it, my hook I hold in a knife formation, I think you call it, not the pencil, but the knife. And okay, my favorite yarn and least favorite yarn. I did answer this in a previous video just recent. My favorite yarn, does it mean brand or does it mean fiber? Well, maybe I can answer both. My favorite brands of yarn definitely are ever growing. So whenever it makes the list in the past 5 years that I've used it, it stays there. Early in the day when I was using a lot of acrylic or the blends of wool acrylic, I was liking Cascade. That was featuring like one of my favorite brands. It still is to today, but I have a few more here to the list that I added in 2023, and I'll just read them to the other ever-growing list that I had to begin with. But 2023's favorite yarns were Willow Rise, Knit Picks Brava, Hirschner's Worsted 8 collection, Caron Blossom Cake, Stylecraft DK, a Stylecraft Special DK. The higher end yarns, because now I'm sort of a little bit more in the know of like what's out there and I can try things, and because I also watch YouTubers who rave about certain other lines of yarn and they're more expensive, I have tried a few of them out last year as well that I was really happy with. So I've got Arcade Fiber Works, I've got an QnA hand painted DK, I have Hobie Dochi Cashmere, Queensland Rainbow Beach, and Knit Picks Hawthorn. So they're just a few from last year. Now we're talking fiber-based. I think I don't really have a favorite, but I would have to say, well, it's definitely the treatment and the color and all that sort of thing. But if you talk about fibers, I really do like merino wool. It's probably one of the most versatile because I do like it when it's been blended with cotton. I do like it when it's blended with alpaca. So as a base for me, the colors look beautiful with merino wool. And yeah, so I'm going to say merino wool in amongst a lot of the other ones too. Okay, here we go. Favorite patterns to work on. I think my favorite patterns to work on are ones that have that secret moment where it's revealed on what you've been working on over a series of rows. So right now, I guess some of those are my lightweight shawls that I've been working on, as well as the cable for knitting. So they feature again as some of my favorite patterns. Now, I don't know whether that is meant to like stretch to designers, but I have so many designers that are my favorites. Right now I am looking at, for crochet, it's the Yaga Yaga patterns, which is heavily charted based. They are a Polish designer. So small instructions in English, and mostly it is read by charts. I'm really enjoying learning so many techniques with the Yaga Yaga patterns. For knitting, I'm going to say the continued favorite over many years has been Stephen West, and trying something new with his like twists and turns that he had 2 years ago, and then going back and buying some of his shawl books on how to do color work, all of those wonderful things. I've really enjoyed the adventure that I go on whenever I pick up a Stephen West pattern. Okay, so my favorite stitches and my least favorite stitches. This is interesting. Okay, so are we talking about just the one single stitch? So with knitting, it's fairly simple. It's either a knit or a purl, which is the reverse of a knit. So I think a group of like techniques together that make up a fabric. I'm going to say for crochet, it would be the rice stitch is one of my favorites, as well as the camel stitch. And the rice stitch has a nice grid formation, giving it a nice woven look. I like that. And the camel stitch is like a diagonal V's in knitting, but it has a nice way of bringing back a pattern into the center and structure. If you've got lots of looseness in the fabric and you want to sort of bring it back to structure, the camel stitch is a good one for that. You just have to be careful that it's not too tight. All right, and there's so many more stitches. There are. I love them all. I have a question here about dream collaboration. I don't really know what that means, like getting into a group and working out something together. Because I love Noro, I think maybe a Noro collaboration would be amazing. It's one of my favorite top 5 yarns, and I would love to maybe go in on an excursion to see how they process the yarn, you know, talk to one of these masters in dyeing and find out their techniques and their secrets. That would be a great collaboration. And I've got one here that says, who would I like to meet next in the yarn world? I'm not sure. I think the next person, because the more like well-known crafters and designers out there, they have so much material about them already online and published and all that stuff. So if I'm wanting to read an article about them, it's all there. But I'm more really interested in the hidden talent, the talent that, you know, have put lots of hard work out there and, you know, have patterns and haven't quite been found yet. So I'd love to, you know, pick their brains on certain things that they're inspired to do and work on. And I keep looking out there in the YouTube world for amazing new upcoming people who have great ideas. So I think it's an ongoing, it's unfocused, but it's an ongoing search to meet new interests and new people who have different ideas. Okay, I have to turn my page now because it says here, what's the most rewarding and frustrating learns from a pattern? I think that's going to be one that I tried recently. Actually, if you're thinking about starting to learn something new, there is a frustration there on just how well you are receiving the information. Like, is it going to take you like 20 or 30 goes before you understand what the technique is? So that's the frustration. And there's many times that I've thought that I wanted to give up on certain techniques that that were new to me, like amigurumi or short rows in crochet or certain cable work, brioche for knitting. You know, there are countless of times when I thought, well, I just want to go back to what I feel comfortable with. But so I think the frustration is always there, and it will always be presented to anything new. And on the flip side of that is, once you actually get to know what to do and read the stitches, that's the most rewarding time for me, when you feel the aha moment and then you're off to the races. So I think those two are the same in the one, the frustration and the reward. Okay, the next one here is, okay, this is an interesting one. Do I start with yarn as my inspiration and then look for a pattern? Or do I get a pattern that I love the look of and then go hunting for yarn to fit the pattern? So I do both. I would say, because I have a stash and I really want to get to use a yarn, for example, yarn that's been gifted to me and I want to, you know, use it because it's beautiful and I would never have a chance of feeling this yarn ever, you know, in my life unless it was generously sent to me. So I want to show my gratitude by making something nice with it. So I then hunt around for a pattern. On the flip side of that, when I'm looking for patterns, I might say, hey, that's maybe not a good pattern for that yarn, but I love it so much. And now I've got the pattern in hand and I think to myself, well, I got to look now for the yarn that will suit that pattern. So it does work both ways. I would say more often than not, I am driven by yarn, only because I get the yarn in and that comes in more so than I look for patterns. So I'm getting in more yarn that I need to then figure out what I'm going to do with it. And that's part of like my process and my excitement of unboxing yarn, feeling yarn for the very first time, that it's all of that's happening in the front, and then I end up using the yarn. So then I kind of look for a pattern. So I think mostly it's that scenario. Do I have time to answer a few more? Okay, I have, I'm looking at the time, 22 minutes, 26 minutes, somewhere about there. I think that's probably enough that I'm going to answer, because I've got a whole new page of questions that I just turned on. And this is more to do with, again, crafting, but then there's also questions here on other arts that I've done in the past. Ceramics being one of them, painting, some illustration, and then there are questions as well on how I came to Canada and what were the reasons there. So I will get to those ones in the next chunk that I put out, perhaps maybe in June, in the summer. I have a co-host here, and her name's Pixel. You guys have met her before. Look at her. She's the glamorous one in the family. Yeah. Oh, she's feeling a little sleepy after her dinner. Anyway, see you later. Bye. Say goodbye. Bye.